All right, what is the Renaissance? So, we actually haven't gotten to the definition yet of Renaissance. But if we look at it, the number one thing we can say about the Renaissance is it's the end of the Dark Ages. It's the end of medieval Europe, also called the Middle Ages. And it can be considered a rebirth. Renaissance pretty much means rebirth. A rebirth of culture. A rebirth of creativity. A rebirth especially in the sciences, literature, architecture, which was caused by an increase in business and trade. Which was caused by an increase in business and trade. The Renaissance, it's not like one day someone woke up and said, hey, let's start the Renaissance now. So we put these years, you have to remember it kind of happens gradually, and it kind of ends gradually. But if we want to put years for the Renaissance, you can say it happened around 1350 to 1550. So it happened around 1350 to 1550. And of course, it was centered in Florence and other city-states, especially in Italy, and then spread to the rest of Europe. One example of how it spread would be Shakespeare, who you guys are reading Macbeth, I believe? Mm-hmm. Shakespeare would be considered a Renaissance writer, but he was all the way in England, which is pretty far away from Italy. But that would happen, hundreds of years later. So it spreads gradually all over Europe. Again, it's an explosion in creativity and art, and a lot of the influence comes from what we call classical works. And what they mean by classical works are Greek and Roman works. So we get a kind of combination of the art that you'll see Greek and Roman gods, but then you'll also see Jesus, you'll see Virgin Mary, you'll see like a combination of Greek and Roman work, like gods in some paintings, and in other paintings you'll see very religious work from Christianity. You get a combination of both. And of course, not enough people give credit, but many people make an argument the Renaissance actually started in the Muslim world because they were translating these Greek and Roman works, and then they went back to Europe later after the Crusades. Also, a big thing in the Renaissance is there becomes a value of individual achievement. They begin to value individual achievement. That's why artists are so valued, that what they can actually achieve, what they can paint. Architecture is valued, what you can build. Before this, the mindset was more, just don't sin, and maybe you'll get to go to heaven. And just try not to sin. So live your life, this life doesn't matter, and maybe you'll get to go to heaven. The Renaissance believes more what's called humanism, which basically states that humans can do great things in this lifetime. The Dark Age mindset would have been more like, okay, don't sin, don't sin, don't sin. All right, I can't sin, I can't sin, I can't sin. Oh shoot, there's a girl. Oh my God, I sinned. Okay, that's more of the Dark Age mindset, not a whole lot of fun. The Renaissance was like, well, you know what another way to praise God is? To show your individual talent, show what you can do, show the gifts that God gave you. And that definitely came through in the art of this time period. All right, so how the Renaissance changes Europe. And as we talked about, the Crusades have a big influence in the Renaissance because more Europeans see the Middle East, they see the Muslim world that's more advanced than their own. And we see the end of feudalism. We see the end of feudalism. And again, feudalism is kind of like a period of warring states. We've seen it in China before. But feudalism is when, like, an emperor or the central government is not very strong, and the nobles basically have power. The Renaissance ends this. Because what happens is there actually becomes kind of like an agreement between the merchants and the kings in Europe. An agreement between the kings and the merchants in Europe. And we see the development of what are called nation states. Nation states are kind of like the modern day countries we have in Europe today. France, Spain. And they'll slowly become the nation states that we know today. So these develop in the Renaissance and towards the end of the Renaissance. Now the kings and the merchants become kind of like, they kind of combine, they kind of form almost a partnership. And it's against the nobility, who used to have a lot of power in the Dark Ages. This happens a lot through trade, again. Through trade. Merchants, they want to sell. They want to sell their products, whether it's spices, which are coming in, whether it is silk, whether it is any other goods, pearls, gems, whatever's coming in, they want to sell their goods. And if you're a merchant, who do you want to sell to? Rich people, yes. And basically anyone who will buy. I mean, you don't care. If people are buying your stuff in China, great, let's sell in China. People are buying your stuff in Vietnam, sell in Vietnam. South Africa, great, sell in South Africa. But the merchants, they want to sell in Europe at this time. And it's a problem when you have all these small little states having private armies against each other, fighting with knights. Is that good for business? Can't really sell things with all that going on. And peasants with no money. So what happens is the merchants start basically forming a relationship with the kings, where the kings realize that the merchants are selling things in their land, they can tax them and get money off of these taxes. And the merchants probably don't want to pay taxes, but if they do pay taxes, the kings can offer them protection, so they don't get robbed. So the kings can offer them protection, and can even do things like build roads from different areas. So slowly we see that the nobility's land starts getting taken away, more roads get built, and trade continues to increase. More peasants are able to leave the nobility's lands and working with the merchants. As the merchants make more money, the kings tax them, and with those taxes they're able to build more roads. They're also able to build their armies up. So what's happening to the kings now? They're becoming more powerful, and they're becoming more powerful than these nobles, who honestly are kind of a pain in the ass to the king anyway, because they don't always listen to them, they don't always pay their taxes. So the kings find the merchants are actually much better to tax them, and they can make more money off them. So what we see is a gradual end to these borders. The nobles' land slowly gets taken away. Merchants are able to travel more within Europe, speaking Latin, the common trade language, and opening up trade using goods from all different parts of the world. Again, they get plugged in to what would be called the Silk Road, Indian Ocean trade, the Afro-Eurasian trade routes. I mean, even goods like ivory are coming in from Africa. Silk is coming in from China. The merchants are able to make money off this. The kings are able to get taxes. They're able to build an army and ships and navy. One other thing that starts happening is the population starts going up. They have more spices. They have more food. As Europe becomes richer, the population goes up. And from the year 1000 to 1,500, it doubles from 38 million to 76 million. And the kings want to expand. They want to start exploring more land and seeing what's out there. Well, look at the years of the Renaissance. What happens towards the end of the Renaissance? What's going on in the late 1400s and 1500s around the world that we read about in our research paper? Where do Europeans go? The Americas. Spain, who is able to defeat the Muslims in 1492, by the way. 1492, Christian Spain is able to defeat the Muslims and get that land back. They also then have access to many of the technology that was there, like the boats, and they're able to use that. Again, Christopher Columbus was from Italy. He was a sailor from Italy. Then he went to Spain to go sail, and then he went to the Americas, and they're able to bring back gold and all these resources. And can we see how Europe starts advancing more and more? And so by 1550, 1600, Europe goes from being what was the most ass-backward place in the world in the year 1000 to beginning global domination. First in the Americas, when they take people like the Taino into slavery, and then later on when we get the Atlantic system or the triangular trade with slavery in Africa. We see how Europe starts changing? And it becomes the dominant force in the world. And this happens towards the end of the Renaissance. Europe is on their way to becoming a very dominant place in the world. And that radically changes Europe. All right, we'll